Is that a soccer stadium in the background?
Yes, Mom.
What?
We're starting.
Oh.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Fredrickson, Dreaming Bear. I'm glad that you're both here. I'm going to tackle some quick prerequisites before we kind of get into things. You both have had the mediated agreement given to you. You both had a chance to look over those. We've talked about that briefly, and those are signed. So I just want to get that kind of out of the way to talk about the prerequisite documentation. Some other quick housekeeping things, right? These are generally scheduled in roughly 4-hour blocks. You know, if it takes that much time, we'll be here for it, but that's kind of up to you, the duration of this. If you need any accommodations, let me know. I'll try to work it out. Moreover, if there's any documentation to which you would like to bring to my attention that I don't currently have it possessed, please do so now so I can kind of review it as we go through things. Again, I'm glad for you to be here. My name is Brock. I'll be your mediator today. Couple logistics real quick. You know, this is as far as like phone pagers and the motion of how we do things. I would prefer that your phones would be on silent. Same goes with pagers. There's no recording of the session. You may take notes, but I do ask that those notes don't leave here when we dispose them properly. Okay. And so I'm going to tell you just a brief bit about mediation. It's an informal setting which gives you a chance to work through things on your own terms. And it helps you kind of come to a decision without the court enforcing one upon you. Mediation is a growing field with more and more people settling this way. I think it's roughly 90% of cases get settled nowadays, or even a little more than that. And the reason for that is, one, it saves you money out of the pocketbook, not having to go through expensive litigation. And two, it lets you get a little bit creative on how you can settle things, kind of tailoring its way to your own individual needs as we move forward. You know, I think it's important to note that these things, you're coming to an agreement. So not everybody's going to leave happy. You're not always going to get what you want. I think it's good to have realistic expectations of how these things play out. You both have two positions, you have reasons for them, and we're here to get to a middle ground to make things agreeable for everybody. And specifically, my role as a mediator is essentially an unbiased middleman. My role is to help you reach that middle ground that we've talked about and maybe walk away with the agreement. If we do by chance reach an agreement, I'll draft up a mediated agreement, which may be filed with the courts and will be incorporated to the court's order, making it legally binding, right? So it kind of works a lot like a contract, except, you know, once you enter into the court's order, it makes it binding, meaning that any violation of the order can then be contempt of court. So I'm going to explain a little bit how the process itself, I guess, the ins and outs of this. We start out with a joint session where we all sit down together like this. I ask that you talk one at a time, no talking over each other. If I'm speaking, again, be respectful, and we'll kind of makes the process go a bit smoother. After we get through both sides of the story, sometimes, if necessary, we can break out into caucuses, meaning I'll meet with you individually. We can discuss issues that you want to talk from the other person or something you're more comfortable with, and then we'll come back together as a group. And this is kind of to get an understanding of what your needs are in this. And then from there, we would come back together and kind of move forward with what we think ought need to be done. I'm briefly going to explain your rights in mediation. I know I say everything's brief and I feel long-winded, but I promise the rest of this will be brief. What happens here is confidential. Nothing said here, no offers made here, or anything else done here can be used in a court of law later if no settlement is reached. Mediation is voluntary, meaning that this goes so long as you're willing to let it go. If you decide that this doesn't work, you can walk away anytime. Nothing's set in stone until the papers are signed. Essentially, you have the final say here. Like I said, I'm a neutral. I'm not here to make any decisions. I am here to help you turn your decisions into something legally binding. Only you two have the capacity to negotiate this agreement to get to the point to where you find a suitable settlement. Now that I've kind of finished with my spiel, I'd like to hear a little from each of you. I typically start with the plaintiff here. That would be you, Mr. Dreaming Bear. Again, while Mr. Dreaming Bear's talking, kind of give me a side of the story. Feel free, Mr. Fredericks, to take notes, and you'll have the opportunity to tell your side of the story soon. Mr. Dreaming Bear?
Alright. Well, obviously my customary wear of my people is important to me and is a long-standing tradition. Understandably so, the graduation regalia is also a tradition. I'm just trying to, let them see how it is important to me in my heritage to get to wear such traditional wear. Particularly, I was hurt by the lack of due process, where I was unaware. The school did not afford me and let me know of the 3 minutes I had to speak my mind during the meeting. Obviously, I know it's a custom that you have 3 minutes to speak, and once it expires, you're cut off, which I was understanding that policy, but like I said, I was not informed of those 3 minutes, that 3 minute requirement. I just feel like I haven't been able to voice my opinion to the school board to try to come to middle ground.
Okay, and let me ask you about that 3 minutes that you're talking about. 3 minutes specifically is that you went to a school board meeting, right? And you had a chance to speak. Is that what you're speaking of?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you got up there and you spoke, you don't feel like 3 minutes was sufficient?
That's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm saying I was not informed that there was a 3 minute cutoff period. Had I been aware of that, I would have altered my speech, so to speak.
Okay. And so I take it from what you told me, the crux of the issue for you is that you feel a little bit disenfranchised by the school because they are unwilling to let you wear your customary wear. You tried to explain this to them, you didn't feel like you got your point across, and so now because of that, you brought this action to remedy the thing that you thought you couldn't do in your meeting, right?
Yes.
Meaning that you went to the meeting, didn't get your point, this is the next step.
Yes. Second and final particular issue I have is the specificity with their flexibility. They're saying I can, best I can understand. Actually, I'm sorry. I'll make this brief, but it's really 3 issues. So first is a lack of communicating the 3 minute requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Second is the vagueness of the student handbook language. I don't see anything in particular that points to graduation regalia. Third is, they're trying to show that they are flexible, where they're saying I can wear my customary wear during the graduation, except while on stage.
Okay.
But to say I can do that except while on stage, being on stage and receiving the diploma is the important part of graduating. So it kind of defeats the purpose if I can't actually receive the diploma and take the picture in my customary wear. So it's really just 3, I guess.
Okay. I think you hit your points. Well, I'm going to turn over to you, Mr. Fredericks. Mr. Fredrickson, can you kind of give me the school's point of view on why this decision was made, and maybe kind of elaborate on the code to your student handbook, which says that the students will play a role in graduation, but of course subject to your approval?
Well, I'll be frank up front. I'm really upset about this matter because we thought we had an understanding with all the parents that that we were going to have cap, gown, black shoes, and we thought they were all on board. And honestly, this feels like a bit of an ambush. I really am taking it personal in that sense. In terms of the meeting, I've been an educator in this district for 25 years. It's always been 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to speak. He had his 3 minutes to speak. You know, for the vagueness of the student handbook, listen, it says that it is subject to the superintendent on final approval. I have the final approval, and I have made the decision that cap and gown and black shoes is what we're going to wear. Now, for a photo booth, I might be willing to make a concession there. We've seen other people do that. I would need to brainstorm it, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
So you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that for you, you've made a decision about what is appropriate in form of regalia, and that's specifically, right, if for the ceremony itself being the sitting to listening through commencement and then going up and accepting their diploma.
That's correct. And I've talked with the students, and they all agree with this as well. So like I said, it feels like an ambush. It's very upsetting.
Okay. So why don't you talk to me about that meeting with the students? So what did you just have a group of the graduating class? You went in there. When you met with them, did anybody talk about their concerns?
They did not. They were all, on board, and it seemed like they were going to get good with it. And I left, assuming that would be the case.
Did anybody say anything at the meeting?
Not to my memory. No.
Okay. Dreaming Bear, may I ask if did you attend that meeting?
I did.
Okay. And did you bring up any concerns at that meeting?
I did, and that's why the school board meeting was scheduled. Or no, it was already scheduled, but that's why I went to the school, the superintendent so that I could attend said school board hearing to air my grievances.
Okay. So the timeline of events is the meeting was had. Maybe nobody said anything directly at the meeting. There was a conversation after the meeting. After that, you said that the best way to address it would be a school board meeting, through the school board meeting, where you could articulate your individual position, correct? And then that led to the issue of you don't necessarily feel as though you had enough time, and you weren't necessarily sure of, I guess, the procedure to which the school board meeting takes place, having being a 3-minute time slot. Does that kind of sound up?
Yes, sir.
Both of you, is that agreeable? Kind of.
That sounds all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Fredrickson, you said specifically it's been said specifically that no wear outside of caps and gowns should be allowed while sitting through the commencement speech. Not just the rule on stage, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And does this include any clothing underneath the caps and gowns that may be traditional?
Well, yeah, that might be okay, potentially.
Okay.
Like I said, I might be okay looking at, him wearing his moccasins if he would want to do that. That'd be something I'd be willing to consider.
What about his headpiece? Would that be something that you could say? As far as the formality of the thing goes, you got to think you have roughly 25% of all of your students, being the students of the graduating class, comes from the Sioux tribe, such as Dreaming Bear does, and I think it might be worth taking into consideration what that means as far as what may be appropriate to the different parents. I understand the majority of your students don't, and that the cap and gown is clearly the most formal. I think that there's maybe a real issue of concern there for the few parents that don't necessarily agree with that. What do you think?
I would say that you point out that, 5 of our 20 graduated are in Dakota, but I would say that the other parents have had no issue whatsoever, have
Sure.
fully agreed and fully complied with what we are suggesting, what we're mandating for graduation.
And would you say that you would be willing to you've showed some willingness already about talking to the moccasins and talking about the photo booth or other things of that nature. So you're not completely unwilling to accommodate based on their Sioux heritage, and you'd like them to celebrate that as well. You're just trying to find the most appropriate solution to do so.
Absolutely. Listen,
Right.
we're not trying to impede on anybody's religion, culture, anything like that. We are simply just doing things the way that we have agreed to, the way that I met with the students and they agreed to, the way that I have the authority to do. So
And during their, you said as you kind of mentioned that you were a bit frustrated with the language of the dress code or the school book policy, but as he stated that it was always subject to the superintendent's approval, and that there was a meeting held where he kind of gave a formal hat or a formal regalia speech. Um, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me that? Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think you would like to happen? If you got your way, what would this look like?
I understand the broad brush of power the superintendent has in the school district, with the school board, with the language written. And I further understand that I have signed this student handbook.
Mm-hmm.
With that considered, I submit that I agreed to it. I think, I know what I would like moving forward is more specificity with the language for students coming after me, because I am certainly not the last Lakota Native American to graduate from this high school. There would be more following me. So maybe a good middle ground for us here is me, along with the other 4 or 5 students in our graduating class of Lakota, being willing to compromise, but on the other side of the street, the school board being willing to compromise in that, put more specificity with their language, because as the language is written right now, it's just too broad in my liking. So maybe in the language stating students are required to wear said graduation regalia so that the students know what they're signing off.
Sure, but I understand your concern about the language being a bit broad, but if it went the other way, right, where you decided, hey, this language is too broad to the point where it brought in this kind of action, and so what we're going to do is just always require, the regalia and black shoes. Well, that doesn't help your position at all, right?
It doesn't, but my thinking is it allows students to understand, parents particularly, to understand what they're signing up for. So if they read that, know what they're signing off on, and they are fine with it, they know that's how we're going to have to walk to graduation. If they don't like it, they know ahead of time maybe you should transfer to a different school or start at a different high school starting off.
And I think that's your worst case scenario, right? It's not the worst case scenario is that we have this conversation today and the school then changes its policies to be less inclusive to the Sioux tribe or the people, the Native American or the Native American students. I think that as far as fixing the language, I think it's always going to have something along the lines of approved by the superintendent. I think that's probably necessary.
It makes sense. I would imagine most school boards operate that way.
I think that we could also change, maybe the language of the school board, or the school board could attempt to eventually change the language of that to include something a bit more inclusive, because as they stated, that wasn't necessarily their intent to do that. It's my understanding that what you and your fellow classmates of the Sioux tribe would have liked to do was wear just basically the regalia robe, white moccasins, and headdress, as opposed to the typical cap.
Correct.
Okay. And as Mr. Frederickson's kind of pointed out that he would be willing to allow the white moccasins. So maybe the compromise here is how can we keep this semi-formal or keep this formal with being inclusive? And I think the white moccasins is a good start.
I mean, we can meet halfway. It's two pieces of clothing, so to speak, that we like to wear, and they're allowing us to wear one of those two, so I'm okay with that. I'll wear the gown. I'm sorry, the cap if I'm allowed to wear my white moccasins.
Okay. Let me ask you, I think that's a good place to start. I agree with you, Mr. Dreaming Bear.
Thank
you. No problem. Mr. Fredrickson, let me ask you a bit. You've already said that the white moccasins may be acceptable. As far as the traditional headwear, to which Dreaming Bear and his classmates stated that they wanted to attempt to wear, when would they be allowed to put that on?
After the ceremony, but certainly not while they're getting their degree. Certainly not while they're sitting, in the crowd, while they should be regaled, as we agreed to.
Wouldn't it be maybe interesting? So I agree that I understand your concern about keeping it formal. Wouldn't it be here's my question: is that typically your commencement is there some sort of walk-in ceremony, right, where they walk in, they sit the students down? What's that going to happen, right,
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
commencement, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe there's some middle ground. We said that they might be able to walk in with their headwear, but then put on their cap, hang their headwear before they go to take their seats and put on their caps. It's a small school. Would that be out of the question?
I really thought we had an understanding, at a time when we need real unity and less individual expression. Why are we going to rock the boat like this? I mean, what's next? We're going to put swastikas out there? Huh?
No, Mr. Fredrickson, I don't believe that that's necessarily what anybody wants. I assure you that I understand. I understand your frustration saying that you want it to be a unified front. That makes sense to me.
Well, I'm trying to sympathize when Mr. Fredrickson is coming from. We're not, I don't wish to be different from my peers. It's just a traditional, in terms of formality, it's the most formal attire we wear for special occasions in my culture. Well, so it's special for sure. We don't want to, try to be a special case here.
Well, let me ask another question to Mr. Fredrickson. Isn't it quite usual, or probably happens pretty often, that the caps to which the students wear, don't they decorate those?
Students do traditionally.
They traditionally decorate those. So, all the caps aren't necessarily unified. They're all caps.
They are all caps.
They are all
caps. That is the thing. They are all board caps.
Is there going back to I forget what the meteor's name is. Wrong. Yes. Yeah. Going back to your actual name.
Yeah.
Going back to what you guys said about finding a time during the graduation where we could wear our caps. That wouldn't offend anyone. I understand not being on stage or being seated, but is there a small window of time we could take a picture of the caps and not rock the boat, as you said?
It's our position that there could be a time shortly after getting your degree and coming off stage that you could remove your regalia, hang it up in the traditional spot where everybody does, and take a picture. We could work with that potential. Now, when you think about it more, be sure, but that might be something we could do potentially. But that's about as far as I'm willing to go.
Okay. Well, that leads me to another question. I like that you're willing to allow them to take a picture in the traditional wear right after graduation or right after the formal ceremony. My question, I guess, would be: is there a way to where, if they were to decorate their caps in any way to show some kind of uniformity with the Sioux tribe? Maybe, I don't necessarily know how the caps typically the traditional caps typically look as far as the Sioux tribe's caps go, but is there some way that you can decorate them to kind of conform with that idea? And then also you'd be allowed to wear the white moccasins. Would that be something that you?
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Sure.
Wear a normal high school cap and decorate it to honor our tribe, or wear one of our tribes?
No, wear normal
okay.
cap, decorate in a way to where.
I think so. That's a good idea because you see, in college, and it's the high school graduation, in college graduation, sororities and fraternities, or sororities mainly doing stuff to signify. So I think that's a good idea. I'd be willing to go with that.
What about you, Mr. Frederickson? Do you think that there's a way to where they could decorate those to where one conforms enough to your requirements, and two, it wouldn't push the lines or rock the boat in any way, so to speak?
Been pretty clear and pretty simple. We just want all the students, while they're preparing and receiving their diplomas, to be wearing cap and gown and black shoes. We've been clear about that. Now
we agree on the moccasins, right?
Now,
Okay.
that's something we're considering. We're not saying we're going to do. I have to think about it.
you. I thought you
I'd have to think about it. But it's something we strongly consider. We would strongly consider. But now, I believe that could be tenable.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Frederickson. I think that the other option is, right, to say, so to speak, is if this doesn't work out and we can't necessarily come to an agreement, the next option is this goes to trial to talk about what the actual injunction might entail. Frankly, I don't necessarily know which title that the injunction's been brought under, but I would say that typically it's some sort of federal violation to where the injunctive relief is required. What I'm saying to you is that I think it probably benefits you and running Dreaming Bear and the students in your school if we could come to an agreement about what they could do to express themselves, and then we could settle this case here and now, as opposed to having to go further with litigation, which would eventually cost a fair chunk of change. What do you want? So here's the things that we talked about that might be tenable: white moccasins, a cap that's decorated in a way that expresses the Sioux tribe, and then 3 being a place to wear immediately following the graduation ceremony and the preceding after events. They may wear their traditional gowns or traditional wear. What do you think about that?
I don't like how this is all gone down, but I will say that moccasins I'm still thinking about, but I strongly can consider that. The cap, I'll concede that'll be fine. And the booth, there's other things that have used booth and everything like that, so that could be potential as well. So.
Okay.
Just to make sure I'm following once again. The cap's done. We agree on that.
We can agree on that.
All right. And the moccasins and the booth are me.
Well, they said the booth.
The booth we can.
The booth
the
is
booth,
like.
the booth we can agree.
Okay, so the booth's a yes, the cap's a yes. We're still working on the moccasins.
Listen, it's the uniformity. Now, if you wanted to change in those moccasins to take a picture, that's absolutely fine, of course. But I still think that I would prefer that everybody stay within the regulations that we've all agreed upon, and I've made it.
Okay. Can we might be able to address your concerns, right, a little bit. So with the moccasins, you've had, and you believe everyone's come to an agreement, and that was tenable prior, and that's why you feel like this kind of is a bit of an ambush. Just those are your own words. So my thing is that how can we prevent this in the future to where this kind of disagreement doesn't come up again?
Proactively speak here.
Yeah, so
that's what I was getting at the beginning. I think a little more specificity. I honor it now. You said you have the authority to approve things, but a little more specificity with the language in the student handbooks, that we know what we're getting into when we decide to go to the school, well knowing when we graduate, get to wear certain things.
Well,
Because if we don't like it, then we wouldn't have attended the high school had we known that like this comes back.
Well, if we were talking in December, this would be completely different as well, but we're not. We're
All right.
talking in May, and so that's, you know, this.
Give me. I understand both of the. I get the issues, right? I understand that we're both a little frustrated. So let me go ahead and ask a follow-up question about the actual changing of the language. Mr. Fredrickson, is it within your purview of responsibilities to draft and make revisions of the student handbook? Is that something that you do?
I believe so. I think it is under my purview.
Okay. And so if we were to I'm not saying that we are, but if you were to do it again, right? And the language was a little bit more specific as far as what is required and then what is optional. Would you feel better if this time prior to this whole ordeal, say if the language said cap, gown, black shoes, or moccasins, would that be overly restrictive, or would that be out of line?
It would be better, but it still is, it goes against the issue of if we want everybody to be uniform and together in this moment of celebration of our community and our young people, this wonderful moment for them.
Sure, but that at least gives everybody the option to wear moccasins too. It's not just there's no you know, it's not for one person or the other. Anybody could do it. It's just more of a overarching. We understand that this is important to some students, so you know if anybody would like to do this, they're allowed to do so. I don't know if you know the headdress and the white moccasins are awfully specific. I don't necessarily know that. Do the moccasins have to be white? Is that?
I
don't think so. You know, might be worth putting in there. Okay. So this is basically boils down to one thing, right? Now, what are we going to do about the white moccasins, and how are we going to address this in the future? I would say that, as you kind of stated, Mr. Fredrickson, that although, you know, almost reluctantly, you understand why this matters to Dreaming Bear, but at the same time, you'd like to make sure that this problem doesn't pop up again.
Absolutely.
Okay. Would it be instead better to say, you know, which would also give you a little bit of that authority that you feel like you're losing, instead of saying the language could be the cap, the gown, and the black shoes or moccasins, subject to your approval, with notice, 3 months notice in advance. How about that? So, or some kind of notice, say graduation is in May, correct? So we must give notice by December 31st of the previous year. So that way that there's not an issue of an ambush, because if they don't give notice and they have signed the handbook, then this issue shouldn't come up again, because really it's the burden would shift to them, right?
It's good idea. I think it seems to me that the expediency is offended, Mr. Fredrickson.
I agree with you.
No, you are correct. You are absolutely correct. I think that could be agreed.
Okay. So how about and then would you say that the class for just this year can use the white moccasins, and then in the future going forward, in order to wear the white moccasins, they would have to submit to you by December 31st, giving essentially 5 months in advance notice, but obviously they'll have this policy given to them their freshman year. They'll have 4 years to do it. So really, there's just a deadline in the last year at school.
I'm all for going forward, making sure we don't have any of these issues. So absolutely.
Okay.
Currently, I'm not still sure about right now with the moccasins.
Okay.
Like I said, I really, really need to think about it, talk about it with some other officials. But I think it could be something we could do potentially. Yes, I think it could be something we could do.
Okay. And as the representative for the school, right? I'm under the assumption that they gave you the authority to make that call today. Correct?
Yes, as the senior superintendent. I know that.
Okay. I think that we've come real close so far, and I understand to Dreaming Bear and his fellow compatriots that the white moccasins are an issue of contention.
It is.
So, and then I'll ask you, each of you, what you think we could do to make that more tenable for this year's graduation. Is there something, well, let me ask Mr. Fredrickson first, Dreaming Bear. Is there something that we could do or that could be done to make this more agreeable to you today? I understand you feel as though you're kind of backed into a corner, but
Well, that kind of is what we're at. I don't see any other way that we could actually look at this, but trying to be agreeable here.
Well, I'm going to extend a little further. How about if we agree, we set in stone that we allow the white moccasins if you apply by, what you said, December 31st, moving forward, and we keep that same rule for the decorated headdress and stepping off stage of the booth to wear full customary wear. If this year, everyone, we have to wear traditional, regalia, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. And this year I'm willing to bite the bullet and in a way kind of sacrifice for the years succeeding. Because like we've mentioned, I think twice already today, I'm not the last Lakota to graduate from this high school. It's an area with a lot of Native Americans, so there will be other Lakota students graduating after me. As long as I can be guaranteed they are for the rights I'm not receiving here to graduate this year. Is that fair? But with that said, I should, before we hopefully agree to it. With that said, I retain my rights to go off stage in a booth and wear my customary wear in a booth. But besides that, the entire graduation, I'll wear the entire normal getup. Like I said, for following years, if they apply by December 31st, they'll allow the exceptions we've talked about.
Okay. I think that resolves the single issue left in this case, right? I think that we will also keep, though, even though he, as we talked about, even though he may not wear, if that's the case, him or the graduating class wouldn't wear white moccasins, that they may decorate their caps in such a way to represent their individual stance as Lakota tribe members. Is that agreeable for everybody?
I think we can agree.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and draft up an agreement that reflects what we just said, accurately reflects the party's interests. From there, we'll get that signed, and you guys can then pay me all your money.